Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. We're in the company of Christopher Dickey. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to France 24's Chief International Affairs Editor, Robert Parsons. Nicholas Norbrook, Managing Editor of the Africa Report, whose headline, he told us, is about Nigeria.
Well, it's actually about a tough year for democracy.
Tough year for democracy, I see.
In Africa.
Not just Nigeria.
Not just Nigeria.
Not just Africa, by the way.
Indeed.
This as well. Julia Wono of Internet Without Borders. Welcome back to the show. Before the break, we were talking about this rage against the elites and how it's influencing the Conservative Party in Britain. Well, speaking of elites, American magazine The Atlantic, for only the third time in its 159-year history, has endorsed a candidate. The first was Hillary Clinton. The second was Lyndon Johnson. The third, Hillary Clinton, if you read that headline in the strangest of election year, it kind of says it all. Against Donald Trump is the headline. And again, we were talking just before the break, Chris Radicki, about elites. These kinds of endorsements,
well,
do they matter at all?
Much more elite than the Atlantic.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's going to sway zero voters who are planning to vote for Trump. I think not a single one will say, "Oh, well, I was going to vote."
But
for
we
Trump,
saw other
but
papers.
The Atlantic came out against him. I don't think I can
we've
vote
seen
for
other
him.
papers like USA Today, which normally doesn't endorse candidates, which has.
Yeah, look, I mean, again and again, when you're talking about rage against the elites, that just feeds it. It just feeds it again and again. We are in a difficult position as the press, as the responsible press, that we can't let Trump just lie his way to the presidency. We have to call him out on it. You have to talk to people who are responsible leaders, responsible governmental officials, and they look at him and they just want to scream in agony because they think that he will destroy the nation. All of that's true, but the core support for him doesn't care about any of that. And they believe in
and we're
lots
talking
of...
about almost half of the electorate as well.
Exactly. Well, that's not the core support. But the core support, the ones who are motivated, and if there's a low turnout in November, the ones who will come out and vote for him and give him the presidency, they don't care about any of that. And in fact, the more that the elites come out and denounce him, the better that is for him in the eyes of those supporters.
And being a reality TV star, how much has that helped him?
Well, I think it's helped him very well. I think he understands what people respond to. I mean, we live in this crazy media environment where Donald Trump or a Kim Kardashian, and there isn't a big difference between them, except for the bodies, they will dominate the news cycle. I mean, really, who cares about Kim Kardashian's jewel theft here in Paris? Millions of people care. Were people reading stories about the white helmets? Should they win the Nobel Prize? No, they weren't reading about them. They were reading about Kim Kardashian, and he knows how to exploit that same kind of desire for celebrity and simple narratives.
Did the Africa Report get roped into Kim Kardashian's stories this week?
We tried to steer clear, although it was hard not to chuckle at the various responses. I think French Twitter came down much harder on the affair than American Twitter. But the point is well taken about the elites, and obviously from a UK perspective, we've seen a lot of people just wanting to push back a bit after feeling out of control for so long. Here was a chance, this referendum, the Brexit referendum, a chance to push back. Is a general election the same in the US? Are there perhaps more people, as you say, the core support versus the 50% who normally decide the elections? And I think the turnout will be absolutely critical, as you say. Will the Latino vote come out to vote? Will they come out in Florida, one of those big states that Clinton would do well to win for her path to victory? I think if she can mobilize the Latino support, then she has a much better chance.
Well, that's true, but I think that there are two black swans, as they say, two big imponderables here that we can't really know. One is the turnout. If the turnout is low, Trump is probably going to win. The other is terror. If there's a big terror incident, it'll play right into Trump's hands.
I'm not.
And it doesn't even have to be. Oh, I am absolutely positive about it.
Because Hillary is perceived by some of the electorate as sort of warm, or at least she has some sympathy for the military. So in case of a terror attack, to what extent that
Well,
that
if you look at
profit to her.
if you look at the influence that the November 13th attacks here and then the San Bernardino attacks right after them had on Trump's campaign, they were huge for him. That's exactly what's his game. His game is xenophobia. Got to stop all Muslims from coming in until we can fix this thing. Got to stop those rapists and murderers from Mexico coming in. That's a real simple solution to terrorism. It's not a solution at all, but it's one that he can sell to a lot of people in America.
Yes, but to how many, I would say, more moderate electors could it sell this type of speeches to? I'm not sure, a regular voter who is not racist, who just wants to
We're
have.
talking about the middle ground, so we're the undecided vote. As you said
Yes,
yourself,
yes.
we already know.
Well, the problem here
and
is
some of them don't want
the problem
to
here is
go
who
too far.
motivates those people to vote.
Yeah.
He motivates his voters to vote. Does Hillary motivate her
Yes,
voters to
that's
vote?
true.
The
That's
truth
true.
is she doesn't. She doesn't motivate people to vote.
Trump motivates both sides, I think.
Well, that
to
could
get
be.
out.
That could be. But every time there's a poll that says, Hillary's going to win, people who really don't like Hillary will say, well, then I don't have to vote for her. I don't have to go out and vote. And that's where you get into a Brexit situation.
And on the elite argument, it is true that Hillary has not completely convinced the electorate that was in favor of Bernie Sanders, for instance, because I was reading an article about millennials who were not completely satisfied with the candidacy of Hillary Clinton on certain issues, such as arguments saying that she is more in favor of banks and she's part of the elite system, and that she will
Bernie was really the
perpetuate-
one to nail that onto her candidacy.
Yes.
And perhaps the biggest failing, and we were talking about this before we came on air, the biggest failing really is to educate millennials on what a catastrophe George W. Bush was as a president. The Iraq War really didn't need to happen. And if the Iraq War didn't happen, we wouldn't be having droves of migrants dying in the Mediterranean. We wouldn't have ISIS in Syria. We wouldn't have what's going on so much in Afghanistan. But sadly, that just got glossed over. Obama was so busy fixing the economy that no one's reminded the millennial generation. And perhaps Bernie could have had a role here to say, oh, actually, there is much, much worse than Clinton.
Robert Parsons, one final word on this crazy news cycle. We were talking about how Trump's impact that we've seen, how he's rewritten the rules of, but also this week with Kim Kardashian. I'm seeing stories in broadsheets, Le Figaro, the New York Times, Le Monde, the newspapers taking this story seriously, and perhaps they should, because now there's talk about how this could dent
Even
tourism. This could dent even François. This could dent tourism in France and the reputation of France. Her getting robbed.
Yeah, as Christopher was saying earlier on, if you don't believe this is a serious story in France, it is a serious story in France, just like it is in the States or in the UK. People want to know about Kim Kardashian. Personally, I'm not remotely interested, but millions out there are. It sells copy. It sells. It's how you get yourself taken seriously.
People really, given the choice, people like news that's a soap opera.
Yeah.
They don't like it when it's an academic lesson. And Kim Kardashian, what is she? That's what reality TV is. It's a real, absolutely fake soap opera. Yeah. And
Yes, but
people follow it and get involved with it, get involved with the character.
And as you said, this is what Trump is so good at as well. I mean, he channels into that.
But what's surprising is that I think there's specialized, media that deal with such type of news. 300 people died in Haiti, probably more.
No, but they're saying it might
So-
really have an impact on tourism in Paris. People might thinking.
Well, 1 month ago they were saying that terror attacks already had an impact on tourism.
And they did.
And they did. So I'm not sure Kim Kardashian being robbed will have another more negative impact. So my question, and I wonder, what's the responsibility of the media? To feed this sort of hysteria. That's not
The responsibility of the media is to make important stories interesting.
Absolutely.
But the problem is that is hugely challenging to do if there's more complexity in the narrative than a soap opera. And it's something that I wrestle with every day.
All right, let's.
And the media is so fractured these days as well. It's not just the newspapers and the main television stations. You've got tiny little outlets who are grabbing onto stories like this, and they go.
All right, we're going to pick up the the challenge here and talk about the 15th anniversary, 15 years ago today, the launch of Operation Enduring Freedom. It was to drive the Taliban and Osama bin Laden from Kabul in the aftermath of September 11th. This U.S.-led push that involved as well the French and the Germans and many others.
NATO.
The U.S. is still there. In the northern city of Kunduz, U.S. air power has been used, but there's also discussed the inability to prevent what's been the second Taliban raid on that city, coming just 1 year after a previous one.
The most serious problem that we're facing right now is security. There are bomb attacks every day, and things only seem to be getting worse.
We're living in awful conditions. No one pays attention to us. The government doesn't care about us.
Robert Parsons, when you think back to that day back in 2001 when there was this international coalition to go into Afghanistan, and you see, well, the situation there today, what are your thoughts?
Multiple thoughts, really. I mean, in one sense, great disappointment that we haven't, 15 years later, managed to achieve much more than we already have, and massive amount of money has been spent. The United States alone has spent $110 billion on construction, much closer to $500 billion if you take into account the military effort as well. One would expect at the end of that period, and with that sort of expense, that more progress would have been made in Afghanistan. But on the other hand, there's no doubt that Afghanistan today is, despite the conflict that is still ongoing, a better place to live in than it was 15 years ago. There has been a significant improvement in certain areas. In the infrastructure, for instance, roads have been built. An awful lot needs to be done. Still, there is electricity in large parts of the country where there wasn't electricity before, but 75% of the country is still without electricity. Education has been significantly improved. Healthcare has been significantly improved. But the problem is that this is, first of all, a traditional society where trying to change attitudes takes an awful long time. Secondly, this is all happening against the backdrop of the civil war, which shows no signs of ending. The difficulty of trying to transform an incredibly poor country with poor levels of education in the context of a civil war, it's enormous. Even given 15 years of effort and $110 billion from the United States, it's an enormous task.
All right, an important part of this, and you covered it this week, was that donor conference that took place in Brussels. President Ghani securing the funding to keep the state going. 80% of the budget comes in the form of outside aid. But there are strings attached. The European Union denies that its contribution is conditional on the no questions asked return of illegal migrants. But listen, if you will, to the tone of the German foreign minister.
Your sons and daughters have fought shoulder to shoulder.
We also expect from Afghanistan cooperation on migration issues. Of course, that's also what our aid should achieve. Young people should find a perspective for their own future in their own country and should not be forced to leave.
Chris Verdicki, your reaction?
There's a great saying in Mexico, if my aunt had wheels, she'd be a bicycle. The fact is, people don't have any hope in a lot of countries like Afghanistan. The only way you're ever going to deal with the immigration problem realistically and permanently is to give people hope in the countries that they come from and give them hope that somewhere remotely on a level of what they get through immigration.
But that's what the German foreign minister just said.
No, he said they should do that.
Yeah.
He didn't say we're going to help them do that. He didn't say we're going to make it possible for them to do that. And they're not going to.
And
Quite clearly they're not going to.
No.
There are 80,000 Afghan refugees in Europe at the moment. The number is going to increase, not decrease, until the war stops.
And it's a bit like the EU, through the voice of the German foreign minister, is kind of trying to escape its responsibility in that situation. You cannot go to get involved in a foreign intervention in a foreign country, and without accepting the responsibility that goes with that. So it's a bit surprising to hear EU leaders lecture the Afghan government on its inability to deal with migrants going to Europe.
He's talking to his electorate, isn't he? I think he knows perfectly well that it's impossible. What he's suggesting is just not going to happen.
That's right. I mean, it's always a cynical thing. And there are aid programs, and then they get caught up in the corruption in the various countries that get the money. And you just have this spiraling, continuing mess that's going to be with us for a very, very long time. The other question is, when are we going to learn in Europe how to integrate the people who do come here, how to make them part of a society and give them actually the kind of hope that they need to have here if our own societies in Europe are going to live in peace? We don't do that very well in the United States.
It's not
or
going to
here.
happen in the near future the way Europe and the UK is talking at the moment.
No, or rather the reverse.
A big step for giving hope and development happened in Africa this week, in Ethiopia to be precise. The ribbon cutting on the continent's first long-distance electric rail line. Built and two-thirds financed by the Chinese, it will ultimately link Addis Ababa to the coast in 12 hours for freight, 10 for passengers. There you see the red dot. Compare that to the 3-day journey it's been from the port of Djibouti. There are even plans to extend the rail link, as you can see, to neighboring states.
We're training civil, mechanical and electrical railway engineers in China, Russia and Addis Ababa universities, who will soon start working alongside the Chinese and obtain valuable experience so we can develop towards self-sustainability. In addition to that, 128 train masters have just returned from completing their training in China.
Proud day for Africa?
It certainly is, and there's obviously a lot of Chinese money which has gone into this, and a lot of sort of geo-economic trends of rising wages in Asia, pushing textile companies to look for places to set up outside of China, and cheap labor in Africa, but it needs to be connected to the ports for it to work. That's basically what's going on. As we see this beautiful scenery rolling by, it's surprising that we're not really talking of the horrific crackdowns on protests that are going on. And it's slightly unfortunate that the railway line has been caught up in it. But it's also... there was a stampede last weekend at a protest right next to one of the station stops. Right, exactly. And so the big bet of Ethiopia that was launched about 15 years ago now is, can we do this developmental state which worked so well in Japan and South Korea, where we centralize planning in the state, and the people of Ethiopia have to live in pretty tough conditions, but they will see their economy and their country transformed around them. And to a large extent, compared to many of its peers in Africa, that's true. And when the IMF and the World Bank are saying that for paragons of inclusive growth, you should be looking at Ethiopia, it does mean something. And that it's not just a train. The capital has a light railway, and the roads have been absolutely transformed. Agricultural people, peasants' lives are being changed. There's no denying that. But this big bet on developmental state also has another big bet riding on it, which is this ethnic federalism, where, in 1991, Meles Zenawi said, okay, we won't explode into our constituent units. We'll be in charge. And when he says we, he meant the Tigray 6% minority, and we'll run things, but we'll make sure that you, as the Oromo, will have your own constituent assembly, as will you, the Amhara, and the Southern peoples, and so on and so forth. And it turns out that people don't buy that anymore, because the trickle down isn't happening as quickly.
All right, so let me just very briefly, because we're almost out of time. Julia Wono, on the one hand, you've got this. You've got a regime that can crack down at times, hard. On the other hand, you've got these institutions like the World Bank that for decades have been talking about an intercontinental African rail network, and here they've done it. They've gotten it done for Ethiopia.
They've got it done, and we hope it's not just another PR, announcement. We hope that there will be a real know-how transfer beyond the words that the minister just told us. And we also hope that it will ultimately profit to all the populations, including the ethnic minorities who are today slaughtered. We have to use the word, because 500 Oromos have been killed up to now, especially because of they were, complaining against these huge infrastructure projects being built on their lands. So there are huge social, aspects to these issues. But this said, in general, it is true that the Chinese investment in Africa has been profitable in terms of having things being done. For instance, this railway is very interesting. It's the second electrical railway that is being laid down in Africa after South Africa. And it was built on a railway that was left by the French in the 19th century. So it shows the extent of the work that has to be done.
There was a need to be updated. Yeah. Julia Wono, I want to thank you. I want to thank as well Robert Parsons, Christopher Dickey, and Nicholas Norbrook. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
The Nobel Peace Prize going to one man and one man alone.
Yes, and there's been an awful lot of talk about it on the internet. Reactions ranging from puzzled to disgusted. But without wishing to embarrass the marvellous Mr. Christopher Dickey, who we have here, I think his words probably sum it up best in the Daily Beast. He wrote, "The road to hell, they say, is paved with good intentions. So, it would seem, is the road to the Nobel Peace Prize." And lots of people talking similarly, rather baffled by quite what's gone on here, because there is an irony, of course. The voters in Colombia said, no, we don't want this peace plan, and then they get awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for it. Sophia Lotto-Persio says, it just sort of feels like the Nobel Peace Prize committee made this decision weeks ago and then didn't bother to find an alternative winner, when, of course, the result didn't go the way of that peace plan. Other Twitter reactions, I'm a bit shocked. This is a much-needed boost, but doesn't solve the fact that we are on the brink of war again. And taking a look at this one, some people are a little more optimistic, saying that perhaps giving the Nobel Peace Prize to Juan Manuel Santos will actually give a bit more impetus to the ongoing fight to secure that peace plan.
That we'll see. And the debate rages we touched on a little bit, many believing that it should have gone to those brave volunteers who work under the bombs in Syria.
Yes, absolutely. Syria's White Helmets, as they're most commonly known, or the Syria Civil Defence, as they're also known, it's their official title. They and the Greek islanders who'd been working to rescue people coming in who were at risk of drowning. They also opened their doors to them. Those two groups, helping refugees and people in suffering, were very much leading the betting. Now, Britain's Guardian newspaper very much nailed its colours to the mast, saying that these 3,000 or so volunteers of the White Helmets absolutely deserve global recognition for what they've done. There is a real feeling of public sympathy right now for the White Helmets, and gratitude as well for what they're doing, risking their lives to help others. Because, of course, Aleppo has very much been dominating the news agenda with that sort of intensified bombardment in recent days. The cover of Time magazine has come out today. Whoever saves one life saves all of humanity. They very much featuring the White Helmets today. This article going into great detail with lots of very shocking imagery too. They say that these people have saved up to 60,000 fellow Syrians, and these are just volunteers. They get given some kind of stipend in order to keep things going, but they are very much doing it out of the goodness of their own heart.
Were you surprised that they didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize?
I was very disappointed that they didn't get it. There actually, a lot of this coverage now is because there's a superb film that's just coming out that shows their work, and it's really extraordinary what they do. And that's not about good intentions, that's about actions. They really do save lives, and they go out and risk their own lives every day to do it, which is why I think a lot of people were disappointed they didn't get it.
A lot of people were very frustrated too that this award keeps going to politicians or presidents, and people feeling that maybe it should be going to real human beings that do, like you say, make a difference. The White Helmets themselves, very gracious in defeat, they tweeted this: "Congratulations to the people and President of Colombia. We sincerely wish them peace." Then a little while later, this tweet followed, which really puts into context, I suppose, the importance of the Nobel Peace Prize. At the time of the Nobel Prize announcement, their own centre, the Syrian Civil Defence Centre, was targeted in Hama. So they are back to work, not only for other people, but for their own people too today. So really that really, I suppose, puts it all into perspective.
Indeed. Many thanks, Emma James. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.